Hello my friends and viewers, and welcome to yet another class guide brought to you by Hengest. Today we're going to be taking a look at one of my favorite specs in the game, the Frost Mage. Now this is not a PvP video, rather it will be showing the Frost Mage in a player versus everyone perspective. Now I know a lot of you are probably thinking, wait, Frost Mage? PvE? Get out of here, right? Well, if you're like me and you haven't raided in a while, or maybe you're just getting back into the game for Cataclysm, you probably aren't aware of just how good of a job Blizzard has done in making the Frost Mage a versatile class at last. For over 6 years it has been regarded as strictly a leveling or PvP spec, and Frost Mages like myself were laughed out of a raid party. Yes, /point/laugh. Hopefully in this video I can do an okay job explaining the changes that have been made and how to succeed on the damage meters as a Frost Mage. Let's get started. We begin by evaluating the base abilities we acquire just by choosing the Frost specialization at level 10. The first of them being Frost Specialization. That's obvious. It increases all of your frost damage by 25%. Now you may ask yourself, why on earth would Blizzard do this? Wouldn't it have just been easier to up the damage values of those spells instead? The answer is quite simple. It discourages the use of any fire or arcane spells while spec'd in Frost. Before we might have seen Frosties shooting some fireballs, a fire blast, or perhaps even a flame strike. Not anymore. This forces the Frost Mage to really take on a characterization like the Lich in Warcraft 3. A change I very much welcome. The mastery for Frost Mages is Frost Burn. This is quite possibly the most valuable mastery in the game. It very simply increases the damage you deal against frozen targets. Spells used while Fingers of Frost are active, attacks made against ensnared targets, or attacks made against those under the effects of Deep Freeze are all benefiting from this damage. It's downright amazing. The first talent I want to go over is Early Frost. This has replaced Improved Frostbolt, which decreased the cast time of Frostbolt by half a second. You can consider this a nerf if you want, but what it really does is even out things for PvP. You no longer have that repetitive burst damage. Instead, you have a more RNG based Frostbolt that allows you to fire off a very fast one every 15 seconds. I'm not entirely sure I agree with this change, but Blizzard has their reasons for doing it. All 3 tier 1 talents should be very obvious. Fill them all out. One of the 2 tier 2 talents that I've taken is called Ice Flows. It decreases the cooldown of your Frost Nova, Cone of Cold, Ice Block, Cold Snap, Ice Barrier, and Icy Veins by 20%. Although in a raiding situation you only really care about the bonus made to your Cold Snap, Icy Veins, and maybe your Ice Block, this talent is still the best option for a PvE build given the circumstances. I've also taken Permafrost. Although you may find some dungeon utilities in the other 2 talents, the healing bonuses from Permafrost assure that your water elemental can maintain his considerable standalone DPS during a raid encounter. The only practical use for ice shards is the increase in range to your frost lance. In fights that demand a lot of movement, this talent can help you maintain some DPS while you transition. And it can also help mitigate some damage for your tank by slowing certain mobs down so he has an easier time kiting. We need to spend some time viewing the changes made to Fingers of Frost. Historically, this proc ability has been the core of the Frost Mage's burst damage. In patch 4.0, it has been modified to affect only Ice Lance, Frost Firebolt, and Deep Freeze. That's right, it no longer consumes a charge when casting your Frostbolt spell. This means a few things. It means your Frostbolt will only ever benefit from Frostburn Mastery when the target is affected by the Deep Freeze debuff. It also means that using your Ice Lance or Frost Firebolts while Fingers of Frost are active are going to make them hit around 40% harder if you've collected as much mastery as you can. Combine that with the fact that it almost guarantees a critical strike, and you'll notice that the Frost Mage has an enormous potential for burst damage. However, all of this power is built on the reliance of this proc to be active, which makes for a huge disparity in the consistency of your damage. You will quickly find that this spec is the most RNG oriented in the game. When viewing a real-time damage meter graph, You can see it is consistently pulsating like a heart monitor. Although versus a raid boss you will eventually settle at a calculable average, you need to be prepared to see small and large numbers that average throughout your battles. Next, we're going to take a look at improved freeze. With 3 points in here, it gives your pet's freeze ability a 100% chance to proc 2 charges of Fingers of Frost. This helps to sanctify some of that damage I mentioned earlier, giving you more of a grasp on regulating when you're able to burst. You absolutely need to make a macro for this ability. Write this one down and bind it to one of your keys. You need to use this every 20 seconds to have Fingers of Frost up as much as possible. Do your best to ensure that you use it only when you have 0 charges of Fingers of Frost up, so you can get the most out of each use. Remember that this ability is cast by your pet, so you can use it during a cast, or when your global cooldown is active. This fact provides a rating dynamic that few classes in the game are able to exploit. Now, Blizzard has added some new Mage mechanic, where your primary spells are supposed to trigger arcane missiles at some rate, but to be honest, I don't know anything about that because my Mage was level 80 before the patch came out. It doesn't matter though, because Brain Freeze converts all of that probability into proccing a free, instant cast Frostfire Bolt. Now this is going to be your second hardest hitting spell next to Deep Freeze on an immune target. Try saving it when you have Fingers of Frost up, but not at the expense of waiting too long that your Brain Freeze procs may overlap one another. Doing this effectively is what really separates skilled Frost Mages from intermediate ones on a raid boss. It takes practice and a bit of chance, but remember to use your pet's freeze to control this as much as possible. At level 80, the rest of the talents I've taken should be pretty darn obvious. Wait for Cataclysm to come out for a new build. The rest of my points have gone into the other 2 trees. I've taken Netherwind Presence in Arcane. Haste is very important as a Frost Mage, because the more Frost Bolts you can get out, the more Fingers of Frost you will proc. I've also taken Master of Elements out of Fire. You don't really need this talent, because Frost has virtually unlimited mana in Raid, but it's probably a better alternative to other options. But I don't know, if you guys use these points differently, maybe let me know. Sadly, there aren't many options as far as glyphs go for the Frost Mage in general, but that is not to say that the glyphs for Frost Mages are not valuable. In fact, I'd go as far as to say they are some of the best glyphs out there. You pretty much have to use these glyphs in order of importance. Glyph of Frost Fire. This glyph is so good, especially if you're able to get them out in under 12-second intervals. But it adds even more RNG to your damage. Glyph of Ice Lance is your next one. Glyph of Frostbolt, Glyph of Molten Armor, Deep Freeze, and lastly, Glyph of Cone of Cold. I apologize that I wasn't able to get some raid footage into this video, but man, you know what? Trying to get into a raid group on my servers these days is pretty lame. Not even the top guilds on my server are raiding anymore, and I don't blame them. The expansion is long overdue. So you'll have to settle for some 5-man stuff. Sorry. This has been yet another class guide by your pal Hengest, and I hope I opened your eyes a little bit to the Frost Mage in the latest build. If you play a Mage and have been discriminating against Frost PvE since the dawn of time, I strongly encourage you to give it a try. Although the Frost Mage may not be the most difficult spec to play in a PvE scenario, it is certainly a fun one. Remember to keep your priorities right when you play. Collect Intellect, Mastery, and Haste. Use your Frostbolt and Pet Freeze to generate Fingers of Frost, so you can use those charges to blast your foes with Frostfire Bolt. If you don't have a Brain Freeze up, use the charges on Ice Lances within reason, but throw Frostbolts in there to continue generating those effects. Always hit your boss targets with Deep Freeze, when you have it of course. It's quite the nuke. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Deep Freeze is currently the hardest hitting spell in the game. I could be wrong on that though. Utilize your DPS cooldowns like Icy Veins and Cold Snap to generate the best outcomes. The Frost spec is largely an instinctual one. Once you have the basics down, rely on your feelings to determine when the best time is to use your spells. In other words, use the Force. Remember to send your feedback and suggestions to my email, hengest@radiantbrigade.com. or just post comments or whatever it is you like to do. Don't forget to visit theradiantbrigade.com to get your class guides and patch updates so you can continue to be the DPS machine I know you are. And if you aren't, you will be after watching this video. Guaranteed. Have a great day, you guys, and stay tuned for more goodies to come.